Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the MyCom podcast. I'm Sean Wakimaloe. This podcast is an independent platform which allows Nigerians from all walks of life to be able to express themselves in a manner in which will help our society, especially drawing the attention of young Nigerians to issues bordering on policy, governance, and politics. Of course, to allow everyone to take the right decision, having learned one or two things from our conversations. This podcast is independent of my weekly and weekend shows on Channels Television, which are Politics Today and Sunday Politics. On this edition of the podcast, I have joining me, call him a notorious lawyer based in Abuja. Notorious in the sense that he will not just let go of things that he believes in, and it's going to cost severally to seek redress on issues not pertaining to him, but pertaining to the public, albeit maybe unpopular, but yet those things that he believes. Opatola Victor is an Abuja-based lawyer and who has instituted several cases challenging the right of INEC to allow Nigerians to use the permanent voter cards for election, and also seeking the opinion of the court in the appointment of the EFCC chairman and several other lawsuits. In fact, he also recently went to court to challenge the basis of the population census being cancelled and the monies that have been spent. Victor Opatola joins us on this episode. Thanks so much, Mr. Opatola, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
One that got my attention was the lawsuit you instituted claiming that Nigerians do not need the permanent voter cards to vote. Why?
Nigerians does not. Basically, what happened was that it is a fallout from the provision of the Electoral Act. So when you look at the provision of the Electoral Act, that's Section 10, Section 16, and Section 47. Section 47 gives, and Section 16 gives INEC the power to issue voters' card. The Constitution, the Electoral Act, did not delineate between temporary voters' card and permanent voters' card. The use of the word temporary voters' card is a strange word when you look at the law.
But the regulation of INEC says you cannot use temporary voter card for voting.
The regulation of INEC is actually contrary to the provision of the law. The regulation of INEC is the making of INEC. They did it in flesh.
Which the Constitution empowers INEC to do.
No, which the Electoral Act empowers INEC to do. So the way the law works is that if the law gives you a level of a form of power to do
prerogative,
yes, you cannot go outside the ambit of that power. If the law says, if the law did not give a difference between temporary voters card and permanent voters card, you cannot go within the power the law has given you.
So the power derogated by the Constitution and the electoral law on INEC, then we can subject it to, you were saying that there were no specifics in letters on the use of temporary or permanent. You are saying that Nigerians should be able to use temporary and voter and permanent.
What I am saying is that where for the deficiency of INEC, Nigerians who have fulfilled all legal conditions are not issued their permanent voters card, but are issued temporary voters card, they should be able to vote using their temporary voters card. And that's the decision of the court.
So just for a moment, I'm imagining that can be subjected because you are literally interpreting the spirit of the law. But it can be subjected to interpretation. And those who will say, what are the intent of the makers of the law, would imagine that INEC should be able to set some guidelines to be able to avoid any kind of, because you look at it, there is a chip to be read by the beavers, and there must be a handshake between the permanent voter card and the beavers machine. And there are those who will say the temporary voters card does not have that component that will have the handshake with the beavers. But you say, you've gone to court to say INEC is wrong in their guideline.
Okay. The way the beavers work, beavers is a new innovation. It's a recent and new innovation. The way the beavers work is that there are different ways through which the purpose of temporary voters card or permanent voters card is for the purpose of effective accreditation, to ascertain that the person that wants to vote has been registered and is in the database of INEC. That's the purpose. So there are various ways in which beavers accredit a voter. You can accredit it through the number. There's a particular number, which is the number that people get on their temporary voter's card. The beavers can accredit using that. So the various process. So what the fulcrum of this case is that accreditation, in its real sense, because of the nature in which the beavers is made, does not need the plastic nature of the permanent voter's card. The difference between the temporary voter's card and the permanent voter's card, there is no intrinsic difference. The only difference is the plastic nature of the permanent voter's card. That means if you have your temporary voter's card, the content of your temporary voter's card is enough for you to vote, is enough for you to be accredited using the beavers machine. So that's
so fundamentally, you are saying that it is not the fault of any Nigerian if they do not get a permanent voter card. So, but they cannot be punished for having the temporary voter card, and they should be allowed to vote.
They should not be punished. They have fulfilled all legal conditions. The legal condition is go and register. And when you register, INEC issues your temporary voter's card. You have fulfilled your own obligation by the law. So the fact that what the INEC gave you, which is a temporary voter's card, the content of that temporary voter's card is enough for you to be accredited to vote using the beavers machine. So the failure of INEC, administrative failure of INEC, or logistic failure of INEC to issue you a permanent voter's card should not be visited on Nigerians. See, voting is a sacrosanct duty in democracy. So INEC should not disenfranchise Nigerians because of their own negligence or inadequacies. And that's not the only reason. The major reason here is that the temporary voter's card that is given to Nigerians in itself is enough, totally enough for you to be.
So you're saying Ondo and Edo,
yes,
if anybody has the temporary voter card, by the virtue of the judgment that you got from the Federal High Court,
yes,
they should be allowed to vote.
They must be allowed to vote.
What did the judgment say?
Now, the judgment is basically saying that INEC should not disenfranchise Nigerian. That going by the nature of beavers and by the nature of the provision of Section 47 of the Electoral Act, individuals who have their temporary voter's card should be allowed to vote. Now, this also happened. When the judgment was given, INEC said it's going to appeal. But the court did not grant a stay of execution to INEC. And the way the law works is that if there is no stay of execution on a judgment given, it becomes operative. So INEC actually disobeyed the court's judgment by going ahead to conduct that particular election against the decision of the court. It went ahead, made an appeal, and the Court of Appeal said that the basis upon which INEC is approaching it, that is academic, because the basis is on the ground of the general election, and the general election is concluded. So the court refused to hear. The court actually struck out the appeal.
So INEC has lost at the Court of Appeal.
Yeah, INEC lost at the Court of Appeal.
And the Court of Appeal upheld the decision of the lower court.
No, the Court of Appeal did not even decide at all.
But it says that they don't have the basis to approach
decide.
it.
Yes, they said they don't have the basis. What the Court of Appeal said is that this issue you brought before us is academic.
But the rest is not lost.
The rest is not lost because the judgment of the Federal High Court still stands. The judgment of the Federal High Court overs on the right of individuals, of citizens to vote, going by the provision of Section 47. The Court of Appeal did not tamper on the judgment. The Court of Appeal did not even say anything about the judgment of the Federal High Court. It neither upturned it, it neither affirmed it. That means that the judgment of the Federal High Court still stands.
Subsists.
Yes.
So in that sense, what you are telling INEC is that INEC has been involved in illegality by disallowing people not to be able to vote.
Right from the general election, INEC has been involved in serious illegality by not allowing people to vote using their temporary voters card. The Federal High Court judgment is still there and subsisting and valid.
Which of the elections have INEC conducted since after this judgment?
INEC particularly conducted the governorship election, gubernatorial election. It conducted it against the express judgment of the Federal High Court without a stay of execution or a superior judgment of the Court of Appeal.
Or appealing to set it aside.
Yes.
Are you planning, because this is blatant disregard to the position of the law.
Definitely.
Because the position of the court is a position of the law, yes, as it is, unless it has been set aside. Yes. Are you seeking the consent of the court in execution of this judgment?
No, the judgment is already there. Because,
I mean, the disobedience of it is an execution also. Because if you approach the court to say, INEC is disobeying and continue disobedience of the judgment of the court, what are you doing to enforce that? That's what I'm asking, basically.
This is it. INEC, one of the major argument of INEC when we got this judgment was that this judgment is only in regards to 2 Nigerians out of plethora of Nigerians who have temporary voters card but no permanent voters card. But the argument is still to begin with, because a right that accrues to 2 Nigerians who have no permanent voters card but have temporary voters card. But the court is saying these 2 people without permanent voters card but with temporary voters card can vote. That in itself should apply to thousands, if not millions, of Nigerians who have their temporary voters card but don't have their permanent voters card.
And you don't think that this is a specific the letters of this judgment, yes, is specific to these 2 persons?
Now, if you're observing the right of these 2 persons to vote using their temporary voters card, it only makes sense to say what is good for the geese is good for the gander.
It's not a specific performance in this end.
No, you see, what I'm saying is this judgment applies to these 2 individuals. So if the court is saying that these 2 individuals, the facts are similar. The fact of this case is that Mr. A and Mr. B have their temporary voters card. They have gone through the necessary requirement of the law and registered on the database of INEC. And INEC issued them a temporary voters card. Then the court said, using your temporary voters card, you can vote using this temporary voters card. Then it only makes sense to say that thousands, if not millions, of people who are in the same situation, exact situation as these individuals, should be able to vote using their temporary voters card.
So there will be 2 elections before the end of this year.
Yes.
What are you doing? INEC is likely to go ahead and disallow anyone without permanent voter cards.
If INEC goes ahead to do that, like it did during the gubernatorial election, it is actually perpetuating illegality. It is actually going against...
Are you seeking an order of mandamus for INEC to obey this judgment?
As it stands, we are not. Because why we are not doing that is that these 2 individuals here that sued in that in this particular suit, they are not in any of the states that Edo State and that will be having Ondo that will be having the election later on this year. They're not in any of those states. So if you get an order of mandamus to compel them to allow them to vote, they're not in any of those states.
So all Nigerians can get the judgment of this court and pursue their right if INEC is not able to provide their PVC. Definitely. Because there was a continuous voter registration as conducted by INEC.
Yes.
And which was it means that if anyone does not have their permanent voter cards ready before then, they can use this judgment to pursue their rights.
Definitely. As it stands now, anybody with their temporary voters card can actually vote. That is the position of the law.
All right. Let me take you to another very controversial thing that you are pursuing, and you are talked about the reimagined regional system.
Okay.
There are those who are thinking that the structure of Nigeria as it is presently is flawed. But you are talking about a regional system of government, a reimagined regional system of government. What do you mean by that?
Okay. It stems from the recent clamor for regionalism. And there, a lot of persons have been clamoring that regionalism should come back to Nigeria. Then my own position is this. If at all Nigerians want regionalism to come back, then it should be from a rigorous perspective. Now, when we trace the historic perspective of regionalism, how did regionalism even come into Nigeria to begin with? It is not something, synonymous with our cultural way of life. So how did it get into Nigeria? Now, there are 3 basic colonial constitutions that introduced regionalism to Nigeria. There's Macpherson Constitution, Richardson Constitution, and one other one I can't immediately recall. So this constitution brought regionalism into Nigeria. Then if you look at the way those constitutions were structured...
Clinton, McPherson, and Richard.
Thank you. So if you look at the way this constitution was structured, you will understand that they were structured for colonial convenience, colonial administrative convenience. Now, if you look at the way Nigeria, what we had then was the North and the South. The South was divided into two, East and West, for the purpose of mental tampering of the people in the South. The reason why the East and the West was divided in the South was because there were a lot of protests back then. So they reasoned that if they divided the East from the West, there will be a mental division in the mind of the people of the South that will show them that they are different, that they can advocate for different cause for their own people. So the difference between East and West is a colonial machination. There was nothing like Southwest, Southeast. That was in the 1930s, if I can remember correctly. That was when the division came, and it was for the purpose of mental division, to divide the people. It was pursuant to divide and rule mechanism. So this is what I'm saying. The regionalism that were now handed over to us, starting from 1950s to the First Republic, it was built on a faulty foundation. So that regionalism failed. The First Republic actually failed because of the deficiencies of regionalism and some other things. That's one of those reasons that led to deficiency and that led to the failure of the First Republic. So what I'm saying is that if at all we are deciding to go back to regionalism, now let's go back to regionalism. Now, one of those things that failed regionalism in the First Republic was parochialism, regional power play, and a lot of other things. The ethnic division and a lot of other things brought regionalism to it. Brought the First Republic to its knees through regionalism, through the problems and fault lines in regionalism. It was during that period that if you're from the West, even no matter how qualified you are, if you go to the East or whatever, you will not be employed. There is a lot of tribal issues and a lot of other things that happened then. Those were the problems. And also importantly, during that period, each region was, advocating for its own economic emancipation and all these things. So there was no major synergy in economic pursuit of the East, the West, and the North.
So you're thinking that regionalism will not work at the moment?
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if at all, if that is what we want, we must reimagine it. So we must rebuild it against
there is a proposal of some group of lawmakers in the National Assembly saying that let us have regional let's put Nigeria into a regional context. Yes. Let's have two vice presidents, vice president of the North, vice president of the South, and one president. And in such a way that there will be economic competition between the regions. You think that will not work? I
think so far, that is not a rigorous thought. That is not, it's just creating further contractions.
It will not help Nigeria grow?
Not. That does not solve the problem of regionalism in the First Republic. So it doesn't make sense that we keep doing one thing over and over again. If we cannot solve the problem that we encountered in regionalism in the First Republic, then we have no business venturing into it again. We should only venture into it if we can assure ourselves that the problems which we encountered in the First Republic, we have solved it by rigorous thinking. That is the only reason why we should revisit regionalism.
What do you think is the major problem of the Nigerian structure as it stands presently? Why is it not working?
The truth is, it's multifaceted. It is not one thing. It is not one thing. But one of those things I will say is that one of the major problems, one of the problems we have, not major, but one of the problems we have is that there are too many. We brought in, for instance, now, the current presidential system we have is from America. The penal system, the penal code system we have, we borrow from Sudan, borrow from India. The judicial system we operate is from
the UK.
It's from England. That is too much contradiction. There will always be problem to this country if we cannot sit down and through rigorous thinking, apply rigorous thinking to create solution given our past history and where exactly we want to go.
So you think that with there being different kind of conferences and sitting down and brainstorming that have been done in the past, pre-2014, there was one under the Obasanjo era. There was the Pronaco. There was the Confab
Abacha.
report. Now the question is, you are thinking that we should have another conference. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying we should have another.
But can we use the report of that? Because those are rigorous, not academic. They are cool, political, academic, and also ethnic consideration in the negotiations that were made.
I don't, rigorous in terms of dialogue, rigorous in terms of the fact that people came together to decide, but not rigorous in terms of research. Or, for instance, now, if some persons, if during that period they came together and decided that we should go back to the old national anthem, that decision was based on what? It was just based on choice and the fact that these people, they preferred it and they were the spokesmen of the people that came together. It was not based on any research that, okay, if you adopt this previous national anthem, it will make Nigeria better. There was no
scientific, no concrete
data, no nothing
to back it. So the national anthem decision was flawed. It's flawed as far as you're concerned.
The national anthem decision is, for instance, now, for me personally, the way I see it, I think there is a current romanticization and nostalgia of what was worked in the past. So if something worked in the 1950s, 1970s, because it worked, to a certain extent, we believe our solution lies in going back to whatever worked in the 1950s or 1960s.
Without empirical fact, data, scientific research on
giving our present problem and likely future problem.
All right, let me take you quickly to the reason why you went to court and challenging Mr. Olukoyede's appointment as the EFCC chairman. And the court has said that you don't have a locus. Why did you do it?
I did it because of the simple reason why I take up all the cases I take up. The cases I take it up because I believe in the rule of law. I believe one of the ways with which Nigeria can be better is through the rule of law. I take it up because it is what I believe in personally. That's why I take these cases up. So, for instance, when I went to court against the National Population Commission to give an account of certain amount it has spent and a lot of other things, it's because I believe in probity and accountability. So the reason why I went to court was because I believe, that there are certain things Nigerians should do and Nigerians should do better. So that is actually what drives my cause.
Mm. So you do not think that the president should have appointed Mr. Olukoyede?
No.
Why?
I do not. Whoever the president appoints is his prerogative. The issue of qualification is a position of the law. So the president can appoint whoever it is he chooses to appoint. But the issue of qualification is a different scenario altogether.
So was that the basis?
That was the basis. It was the basis of qualification.
Your own dispute with the president's decision was that you don't think that Mr. Olukoyede is qualified to be the EFCC chairman.
Yes. The grouse of the whole matter is that the appointment does not meet the requirement of Section 2 of the EFCC Act.
What does it say?
Section 2 of the EFCC Act, it says quite a number of things, but basically what it's saying that first, to be the chairman, you must have 15 years cognitive experience. I can't recall it offhand actually, but basically what it's saying, to my own interpretation, is that you have to be from the law enforcement, and I wish I can see it exactly so as to be able to just tell exactly. I don't want.
But what was it exactly you brought to the attention of the court?
What I brought to the attention of the court is that that particular section, the subsection 1, 2, 3, is conjunctive. It's not disjunctive. So it should be read together. So if the court is saying you should have 15 years cognitive experience, it should be 15 years cognitive experience as in the law enforcement agency or in the security agencies. So that's basically the argument.
But the court has said you don't have the right to do that.
Yes, the court said I do not have locus. So basically what the court is saying is that there is no special harm that came to me beyond and above that of every other Nigerian. That is what the court is saying.
And do you agree with the court's position?
The judgment will come out, we'll go through it, and we'll know the next step to take.
You also are saying that there needs to be an investigation into the reasons why the national population exercise was cut short.
No. Basically, what I'm saying is that I want probity and accountability in regards to what the National Population Commission is doing, the amount they've spent so far, how they spent those amounts. Back then, when I instituted the suit, they were actually at the verge of conducting census then. So what it is we are saying is, before you go into census, there's certain pivotal things that should be on ground. Are those on ground? Have you done due diligence report? The machines that you said you want to use, have you? Is there a stress test on them to be able to ensure that when it comes to the point where they will be functioning, they won't just collapse or they won't stop functioning because of whatever burden they will be going through. So basically, these are what I went to court for against the National Population Commission.
And what was the court?
The court compelled National Population Commission to give me the documents and everything that I requested for, actually.
Have they done that?
No, they haven't. And we'll take that in strides.
Let me ask you, what are your thoughts on the recent security of loans by the federal government?
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay. Now, so for a couple of years, the federal government has been borrowing funds from the CBN, and it has accrued to 24 point something trillion. Definitely more than that, but let's say 24 point something trillion. So, and the federal government wants to securitize the loan. What it means is that it wants to pay it back. You want to restructure it in such a way that it will be convenient for it to pay it back, and by doing like that, it becomes public debt. Securitization makes it a public debt. So we went to court and says that this, first of all, the provision and the provision of the ways and means was actually abused both by the CBN and by the federal government. That the fact that the federal government kept borrowing over and over from the CBN contradict the provision of the Ways and Means Act in the CBN. That should be Section 38 thereabout. Contradict that particular provision of the CBN Act. So we went to court and we said, okay, this is against the law, and that's the basis of our argument. We actually wanted the court to declare it as illegal.
But what are your views on the way to ensure that public funds and don't go in the manner in which they've gone in the past few years?
Actually, the democracy is good. Everybody wants democracy. Okay, many people want democracy. But the issue is that there is a burden in democracy. People often forget the burden that democracy brings. How do I put it? The glamorization of democracy often make us forget that there's a burden. And who is this burden placed on? The burden is placed on the people. The burden is placed on the citizen. So in regards to accountability of public fund, the burden of vigilance is on that of the citizen. The burden of vigilance is on the people. So as it is right now, a government who doesn't follow the law cannot hold itself accountable.
Do you think the Nigerian people are vigilant enough about the way they are managed?
I don't believe so. There's a capital no. We are not.
Why?
Probably indifference. One, it can be due to indifference. Probably it can be due to lack of proper information and knowledge. And probably it can be due to obfuscation of information. So, there's actually a way social media does it now, that even if a true information is out, there's a way it is obfuscated, to make it seem as if it is inconsequential, to make it seem as if it's of no relevance. Meanwhile, that information, when it's put together and analyzed, you get to know how important it is.
How best do you think the Nigerian people can hold the government accountable?
The Nigerian people can hold the government accountable not as an individual. It is best when you come together to hold the government accountable. It is best when there's an organization. By organization, I do not mean formal organization. I mean people, friends. For instance, now, the best form of holding the government accountable is when, if I have 5 friends, is when we as friends can decide that, okay, apart from the fact that we go out and talk and discuss other issues, we on our own small capacity can decide to hold the government accountable. If there's a club of 50 members, the club can decide that apart from our social activities, we can decide to hold the government accountable. So this is the best way to hold the government accountable. The process where individuals, as few individuals. So as a matter of fact, I believe, it is my firm belief, that all of us should be an activist, should be human rights activist, should be human rights advocate, should be public interest advocate, should be public interest activist. That is the only way in which the government can be effectively held accountable, not by few individuals, carrying the burden.
Are you worried about the involvement of the Nigerian young person in the manner in which their government is run, or their lives and the nation is run? There are those who believe that the young people are alienated, they are aloof, they don't care about governance and politics, and that they're just interested in entertainment and fun things. Are you worried about that trend?
The recent happenings has, shown a surge in young people, getting involved or getting interested in governance, or government activities. But the truth is, we want more, we need more. So if there is an apathy in regards to young people getting involved in governance and in government activities, then the question should be what and why? What leads to that and why? Is there a gatekeeping? Is there some form of hamstringing or threat to it? So that's the question that, that should be the follow-up question.
You don't think that there is a problem in the near future? If the young person, the Gowans of this world, they were young, the Bukola Sarakis, the Ojus or Kalus, they were young when they were in power, when they came into power. And now the Donald Duke, when they became governor, they were in their 30s. And how many 30-year-olds are governors in the country today? Are you worried about the future of this country as it pertains to the Nigerian young person? Because there are those who believe that the young person is not interested in governance and politics. They are just interested in fun and entertainment.
No,
and what?
Young people that I know are very interested in the progress of this country. Young people that I know are way, 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 way more patriotic. There are no set of people that the fact that this country is not working pains more than the young people that I know. So they are very interested. And I believe there's a danger because the current happening economic hardship and every other thing is increasing the apathy in the minds of the young people. And beyond that, I think it is dangerous. What is actually happening recently is dangerous. The apathy of the young people is dangerous. But notwithstanding, I still believe that, a fair number of people are getting more interested in governance. But it should be more than this. But beyond that, me personally, I believe young people should focus more on organizing, bringing themselves together towards a cause. We should not, there is no benefit in a one-man show or a one-man thing. The future of the world is in communities, is in organizing. So if young people want the real change for this country, the real change for this country involves people, young people, no matter how few you are, no matter how numerous you are. Organize yourself, come together, pursue a cause. That's the future of this country. And beyond that, young people, I say we because I'm young too. Young people, we must apply ourselves towards the rigorous pursuit of knowledge. We have to. Because when we clamor for something, when we clamor to be in governance, if you're not armed with the right knowledge, you will not be right knowledge and resources and people, and you will not be different from those who you're fighting against or those who you're advocating against. So during this period, now that young people are not yet there in governance, or those who are there in governance are doing anyhow or are not being are just messing up the whole thing. Young people, as far as we are clamoring to be in governance, making government people in government accountable, importantly, we have to apply ourselves to rigorous knowledge.
All right. Finally, I forgot to ask you, do you think that we need to spend so much money on census? What is the value of that exercise to our social and national development?
Well, I think it's important. It's important because, when we want to decide who should get what, when, and how, we should be able to decide, okay, the people in this particular place, what do they need? These numbers of persons, we should be able to decide, okay, if 200,000 people are in a particular location, what and what should be given to them? What and what, do they need? But the need for the census is not as important as the rigorous process that should go into census. We should not waste money in conducting another census if we know that we're not going to conduct it effectively. It's just then of no use.
Mr. Victor Opatola, thank you so much indeed for your thought today. I appreciate it. Well, that is our edition of the podcast with Mr. Victor Opatola, a lawyer who believes in something and goes to court to challenge the system about it. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of today's edition of the MyCon podcast. I'm Sean Okimale. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of MyCon Podcast with Sean Okimale. MyCon Podcast for the independent mind.